All right, Carlos Alcaraz is back, and so are we after a short hiatus after the Australian Open. Welcome back to the Slice. So, Carlos Alcaraz, the former world number one, weird to say that as he's still 19, I think, is returning to action after being injured and missing the Australian Open. So, he had some comments to say about him losing the number one ranking at Djokovic, saying it was tough to watch from home as Djokovic took that from him, and it's his goal to get it back. So Carlos Alcaraz is back in action, trying to get back to world number one. And Felix Auger-Aliassime is in Rotterdam trying to defend his title for the first time ever. So we're going to do a brief look at the ATP action that's going down this week here on the Slice. So let's get into it. How are ya? How are things? Welcome back to the show. Quick shout out to Mike Coleman, who sent me this hoodie from a new design that they've done over at Coleman Tennis called No Rest. It's like a tennis skeleton. Very cool hoodie, very comfortable. I'm going to leave the link below to check out his new collection down below. Shout out. Thanks, Mike. And welcome to the Slice. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel. And click the like button and click all the links and check out our stuff below. Just get around the content on Instagram, Twitter, and here on YouTube. The Slice is your destination for tennis news, ATP, WTA, analysis, commentary, all the jazz. So thanks for being here. Like I said, this is a short breakdown of the ATP action this week that's going down. We got two ATP 500s. Obviously, we got Rotterdam and Buenos Aires in Argentina, the Argentina Open. And two exciting tournaments for sure. We got big stack draws, mainly in Rotterdam, which is a pretty top-heavy draw with huge, big ranking players throughout. Tsitsipas, Rublev, Felix, and Rune are the top four seeds. That's pretty. So 4 top 10 guys there. That's pretty big time. And then we got Buenos Aires, like I said, where Carlos Alcaraz is going to be back in action. This guy, the former world number one, like I said, who was out with a leg injury and not able to defend his title his ranking in Australia, which was disappointing for everyone, disappointing for us, took away from a lot of the storylines of that tournament. But he's back now. Want to read a quote he said about that I saw on the First Serve AU. They had me on, did an interview with them back during the Australian Open. Carlos said, quote, "It was really hard to miss Australia. It was difficult to watch it on TV and see Djokovic take number one from me. It was clear that number one was going to be taken from me sooner or later. That was going to be difficult to keep it all the time. Now the goal is to get it back." End quote. So Carlos is obviously trying to get back to number one. I don't know if his goal last year was to get to number one, but it ended up happening, obviously, after he won the U.S. Open. And, in my opinion, he was kind of the player of 2022. Even though Nadal won the first 2 majors of the year, Djokovic won Wimbledon. Carlos had, one of the most incredible breakouts, even though we all knew who he was coming into 2022. We did not think that he would play at the level that he did. And it's about a year ago at this time. I guess it was after he won Miami, so about a month from now. But it was about this time where I made a video saying that, Carlos Alcaraz is the most exciting player in tennis. And I think that was a pretty safe claim to make. So he went on to do what he did, which was incredible. And now he's back in action, hopefully injury-free here to go. So let's take a look at, I guess before we take a look at it, what do I think he can do? Can our Carlos Alcaraz get back to number one in 2023? And while he doesn't have too many points to defend, he's kind of running out of time a little bit on that, because he didn't have any points to defend at the Australian Open. So he could have made some more, even put some more distance between himself and the field, even though Djokovic probably would have had a pretty good chance to close that gap. If Carlos was to go far, like the semifinals or the final at the Australian Open, he would still be number one, I think, even with Djokovic winning it. But he still has points to make up at, in this swing here, even though he won, I think, this tournament last year. Maybe it was Rio. I should have looked that up. But he didn't win Indian Wells. He did win Miami. So, yeah, has some points to defend there. And actually, I guess he does have points to defend going through the clay swing. So he is kind of area that he could have gained has kind of passed. But he does still have some tournaments, obviously, where he didn't I'm mainly talking about Wimbledon and the French Open, where he didn't really capitalize. Obviously, Wimbledon had no points, and then the French Open, he could have done better than he did. I think he made the 4th round, losing to Zverev. So, yeah, Carlos, can he get it back? We'll have to see. He's going to have to play the big matches against now the number 1 player in the world consensus in Novak Djokovic, and that's going to be interesting to see because now he has more to lose than I think he did last time they played, where Djokovic was coming back from injury or from time off, was the favorite, and Carlos was still just a young guy on a roll. So it's going to be different with the pressure that Carlos might have on himself. So we will see. But we'll see him back in action very soon here in Buenos Aires. So let's just take a look at the draw that he has got. So he's going to play in the round of 16, Laszlo Djere, who can be a tough competitor in general, especially on clay, the Serbian. And then he will play maybe Sebastian Baez, which would be super interesting. But Sebastian Baez has had like a terrible last 6 months or so, just barely being able to win matches. So I don't know if he even will be playing Baez there, but we'll see. Other players don't seem to pose a huge threat to informed Carlos Alcaraz, if we're just being honest. And then in the quarterfinals, he could play. Well, that would be the quarterfinals, actually, I guess. Wow. So yeah, the quarterfinals would be Sebastian Baez. So that's a pretty loose quarter there for Alcaraz, if we're being honest. And in the semifinals, he's either going to play Diego Schwartzman or Francisco Cerundolo, 2 Argentinian players. We're in Argentina. That could be crazy. And then so many South Americans and Spanish players in this section. It's crazy. Good to see, obviously. You're going to get that Juame Munar in that section, but still Schwartzman or Cerundolo, that could be a good semifinal test for Alcaraz to see if he's back, see what his level's like. And then on the bottom half, you got Dominic Thiem as a wild card there versus Alex Molcan, has not played yet. And then you got Cameron Norrie, really, and Lorenzo Sonego, really the only kind of big dangers on the bottom half. So in all reality, this ATP 500 is not too difficult for Carlos to come back into, which is good, obviously, for him if he can get through that first match versus Djere. But yeah, what do you guys think about the challenge there? I don't see too big of a challenge, and I would be disappointed if he didn't make the final, I would say for sure. And his eyes would be on winning that tournament and making a statement that he is back and he's coming for that number 1 seed again. So yeah, it'll be good to see him. It'll be good to see, I'm sure he's fully healed up, and it'll just be good to see where he picked up last year. That was what I wanted to see at the Australian Open, was Carlos Alcaraz picking up where he left off last year and, showing us why he's the number 1 player in the world and seeing if he can follow up on the crazy, crazy success he had last year. So we'll see if he can do that. Now heading over to Rotterdam in Europe, where we have, I would say, a much more top heavy, much more potent draw in all reality. We got Stefano Tsitsipas, like I said, on the top as the number 1 seed, taking out Rusev Wari in the first round, 7-5, 6-1. So he's only lost 1 match in all of 2022 or 2023, and that was the final of the Australian Open. We got Stan Wawrinka getting a win over Bublik, who destroyed a bunch of rackets. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if it was in that match. Well, it was definitely probably in that match, actually, which is crazy. That was yesterday, I think. Carreño Busta going down to Richard Gasquet. So we got Wawrinka versus Gasquet in the second round of Rotterdam. That's a classic matchup there. But we got Stefano Tsitsipas as the top seed. We got Zverev as the 8th seed. Holger Rune in there as well as the 4th seed. A lot of big names in this tournament. Daniil Medvedev gets his first round win in 3 sets over ADF. And Felix Auger-Aliassime, the Canadian top dog, number 3, defending champion, easily moves through Lorenzo Sonego 6-2, 6-3. We'll play Barrère next of France, and then could play Medvedev in the quarterfinals, and then would play Rublev in the semifinals, and then could play Tsitsipas in the finals. So people are talking about how tough of a draw this is for Felix to defend his title, which it is for sure, but it's not really any harder than what he did last year to win the title. If I'm just going off memory here, I think he beat Murray, he beat Rublev, he beat Norrie, and then he beat Tsitsipas in the final. So tough route last year, tough route this year. These ATP 500s, especially Rotterdam, always has a tough field. But that's what Felix did last year. So he's just going to have to do it again if he wants to defend his title in 2023, which I think he could do. We got Hubie Hurkacz coming over RBA in 3. Wow, that was looked like a bit of a war in 3 sets there. And then a lot of these matches still left to go. So Felix Auger-Aliassime trying to defend his title for the first time ever. Everyone made so much noise about him last year, never having won a final. I think he made 8 finals at this time. He went on to win Rotterdam and 3 more titles in the fall, as well as the Davis Cup and the ATP Cup and the Laver Cup to start. So he's like all about the cups, and now he's a 4-time title winner on the ATP, trying to make it 5. So that's an update on Rotterdam and Buenos Aires on the ATP Tour, as we got the former world number 1 in the back in action, Carlos Alcaraz, and Canadian number 1, Felix Auger-Aliassime, trying to make some waves. Now, I will say one last thing. I don't think I've talked about it on the, well, I actually have talked about it. I talked about it on the North End of the Net show, but the last thing I saw about Felix Auger-Aliassime was on Breakpoint on the Netflix show, the crazy controversy around Uncle Tony and kind of the conflict of interest with Rafa Nadal in their 4th round match. That was crazy. And I did make a cameo in the show there. So if you guys go back and watch Breakpoint in that episode, you can see in that kind of media scrum where, not even a media scrum, like Uncle Tony just comes off court after a practice of Felix to talk to some media who were there, including me, even though it wasn't credentialed. He comes and talks to us, and you can see on the show that I'm there with my hat. So see if you can point that out. But that was still crazy. Anyways, that whole controversy, I still don't know what I think about that, but I'm still thinking about it because that was kind of controversial, if you ask me. So anyways, that's the slice on Rotterdam and Buenos Aires and the return of Carlos Alcaraz. Let's see what he can do. Let me know what your thoughts. Can he take back number 1 in 2023? Or does Djokovic, if he's going to play more, Djokovic has so many points to gain, right? He didn't play the US Open last year, didn't get any points for Wimbledon, already got 2,000 more from the Australian Open. But if he can get into the US Open in the US to play these Masters 1000s, which I think he will, definitely at least Cincinnati, and probably Toronto as well, it's going to be interesting. And it'll be tough to take the number 1 from him for sure. So it'll be a big, big challenge for Carlos to do it. And let's see if he can. Anyways, that's the slice. We'll leave it with this, and we'll see you guys next time here on the show.